Marie Harper arrived at Westbridge Manor that winter night, wearing dignity like armor, though her dress told a different story. The aristocracy whispered behind gloved hands, their judgment sharp as the December frost. She was a widow without prospects, a woman society had already forgotten. But one man saw something else entirely. Duke Martin Caldwell had buried his heart with his first wife, swearing never to feel again. He needed heirs, not love, a transaction, not tenderness. Yet when he looked at the humiliated widow standing alone in that glittering ballroom, something stirred in the ruins of his carefully guarded soul. What he said to her would change everything. The chandeliers of Westbridge Manor blazed with 1,000 candles, casting golden light across silk gowns and jeweled throats. Marie Harper stood at the entrance of the great ballroom, her breath catching not from the grandeur, but from the weight of every eye that turned toward her. Her dress, a deep emerald green that had once been her mother's, had been carefully altered to fit the current fashion. The fabric was fine, but anyone with a discerning eye could see the slight discoloration where the hem had been let down, the almost imperceptible mending at the shoulders. It was a beautiful gown worn by a woman who could no longer afford beautiful things. Lady Annabel Worthington noticed immediately. The woman glided across the polished floor, her cream silk gown whispering with each step, diamonds glittering at her throat like ice. Her smile was practiced, perfected over years of social warfare. "Miss Harper," Lady Annabel said, her voice carrying just far enough. "How brave of you to attend. I had heard your circumstances had become quite reduced." Marie kept her expression serene. Her late husband, Thomas Harper, had taught her many things during their 5 years of cold matrimony. One of them was how to hide pain behind a pleasant face. "Lady Worthington," Marie replied with a slight curtsy, "you are kind to notice me." The older woman's eyes gleamed with malicious amusement. "Oh, we all notice you, my dear. It is rather difficult not to when one arrives in a gown that has clearly seen better seasons." The women around them tittered softly, the sound like breaking glass. "I find that true elegance lies not in newness, but in dignity," Marie said quietly. "A lesson some have yet to learn." Lady Annabel's smile froze for just a moment before she recovered. How quaint. Though I suppose dignity is all one has left when fortune abandons them. She swept away in a rustle of silk, leaving Marie standing alone as the whispers spread through the ballroom. "Poor thing. Did you hear she might lose the cottage? Thomas's cousin is demanding his inheritance." Marie forced herself to move forward, to accept a glass of champagne from a passing servant, to pretend that her world was not crumbling around her. The truth was worse than any of them knew. Edward Harper, her late husband's cousin, had indeed begun legal proceedings to claim the small property Thomas had left her. Without it, she would have nothing. She was 28 years old and utterly alone. Across the ballroom, Martin Caldwell watched the scene unfold with growing displeasure. He had not wanted to come tonight. Socializing held no appeal for a man who had spent the last 3 years in mourning, but his solicitor had been insistent. "You must be seen, Your Grace. The duchy requires an heir." An heir. The words felt like stones in his chest. Martin was 36, a widower, and the Duke of Ashford. He had loved his first wife with passionate devotion, and when she had died in his arms after a sudden illness, something inside him had died as well. He had sworn never to feel that way again, never to be that vulnerable. Yet his title demanded continuity. The Caldwell line stretched back centuries, and it would end with him unless he remarried and produced sons. But watching the widow being humiliated in the center of the ballroom stirred something else entirely. Anger, not at her but for her. He recognized Marie Harper, though they had never been formally introduced. Her late husband had been a minor gentleman of modest means. Thomas Harper had died 2 years ago from pneumonia, leaving his young wife in reduced circumstances. Martin watched as she lifted her chin, refusing to cower before Lady Annabel's venom. There was steel in that spine, grace in the way she held herself despite wearing a remade dress. Most women would have fled in tears. She stood her ground. "Your Grace," a voice said at his elbow. Martin turned to find Charles Pemberton, a portly lord with too much wine in his system. "Terrible business about Mrs. Harper," Pemberton continued. "Edward Harper is determined to have that cottage, claims Thomas had no right to leave it to her. The courts will likely side with him, being that she produced no children. Martin's jaw tightened. And what is your interest in the matter, Pemberton? None at all, Your Grace, merely making conversation, though one does wonder what will become of her. A childless widow with no means is in a precarious position indeed. Pemberton wandered off, leaving Martin with an unfamiliar sensation burning in his chest. He should not care. This woman's troubles were not his concern. He had his own burdens to bear, but he could not stop watching her. Marie had moved toward the tall windows that overlooked the gardens. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the manicured hedges with white. She stood alone, her champagne untouched, her profile outlined against the darkness beyond the glass. She looked lost, not helpless but profoundly alone in a room full of people. Martin found his feet moving before his mind had fully decided. He crossed the ballroom with the easy authority of a man accustomed to deference. Conversations paused as he passed. Women curtsied, men bowed. He acknowledged none of it, his attention fixed on the solitary figure by the windows. "Mrs. Harper," he said quietly. She turned, startled, and for a moment their eyes met fully. Martin felt something shift inside him, subtle as a door opening in a dark room. Her eyes were hazel, flecked with gold in the candlelight. Intelligent eyes, sad eyes, but not defeated. "Your Grace," she said, dropping into a curtsy. "I am honored." "There is no need for such formality," he replied, surprising himself with the gentleness in his tone. "I merely wish to inquire if you were enjoying the evening." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "That is kind of you to ask, though we both know the answer. Lady Worthington can be unkind," he said. "Please do not take her words to heart." Marie's expression shifted, something raw and vulnerable crossing her face before she mastered it. "You are very gracious, Your Grace, but words are the least of my troubles." She had not meant to say it. He could see the regret flash across her features the moment the words left her mouth. "Forgive me," she added quickly. "That was inappropriate." Martin should have agreed, should have made a polite excuse and returned to his position of detached observation. Instead, he heard himself say, "Sometimes burdens are lighter when shared, even with strangers." She looked up at him then, truly looked at him, and something passed between them in the silence. Recognition, perhaps. Two people who understood what it meant to carry grief like stones in their pockets. "You are not what I expected," she said softly. "And what did you expect?" She hesitated, then answered with that same dangerous honesty. "Someone colder. They say you have not smiled since your wife passed." "They say many things," Martin replied, most of them true. The musicians began a new waltz, the music swelling through the ballroom. Couples moved toward the dance floor, silk and satin swirling in practiced patterns. Martin extended his hand, driven by an impulse he did not fully understand. "Would you honor me with this dance, Mrs. Harper?" Marie stared at his offered hand, as if it was something miraculous and terrifying in equal measure. "Your Grace? People will talk." "They are already talking," he said. "At least let them talk about something that might bring you joy rather than pain." For a long moment she did not move. Then slowly she placed her hand in his. Her gloved fingers were small and cold against his palm. He led her onto the dance floor, feeling the weight of 100 stairs, hearing the whispers that rose like a tide around them. He did not care. They began to move, and Marie followed his lead with a natural grace that suggested she had once loved to dance before grief and circumstance had stolen such simple pleasures from her life. They did not speak for several measures. Martin was intensely aware of the warmth of her, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair, the way her hand trembled slightly in his. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "You did not have to do this." "I know," he replied. "Why did you?" She looked up at him with those remarkable eyes, and Martin found himself answering with a truth he had not known he possessed. "Because I could not stand to see you hurt for one more moment." The music carried them around the floor, and in that moment, with snow falling beyond the windows and candlelight turning the ballroom into something from a dream, two lonely souls found an unexpected connection. Neither knew that this single dance would change the course of both their lives forever. The waltz ended too soon. Marie felt the loss of Martin's hand on her waist like a physical ache. For those few precious minutes, She had forgotten the whispers, the judgment, the looming threat of Edward and his legal claims. But reality crashed back the moment the music stopped. The other guests watched them with naked curiosity. Lady Annabel stood near the refreshment table, her expression tight with displeasure. "Thank you, Your Grace," Marie said, curtsying as propriety demanded. "You have been most kind." Martin's dark eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "The kindness, Mrs. Harper, was entirely mine." He bowed and stepped back, and Marie felt the cold rush in where his warmth had been. She needed air. She needed escape. Marie made her way toward the French doors that led to the terrace. No one seemed to notice as she slipped outside into the December night. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and clean after the oppressive heat of the ballroom. Snow fell in soft flakes, catching in her hair and on her shoulders. The terrace stretched before her, empty and peaceful, bordered by stone balustrades covered in white. Marie walked to the far edge, gripping the cold stone with both hands, and finally allowed herself to breathe. How had her life come to this? 2 years ago she had a home, a place in society, a future that seemed secure if not joyful. Now she had nothing. Edward would take the cottage. The courts always sided with male relatives over childless widows. The thought made her chest tighten with panic. A sound behind her made her turn. Martin stood in the doorway, snowflakes dusting the shoulders of his black coat. He had followed her. "Mrs. Harper," he said quietly, "forgive me for intruding, but I could not help but notice your distress." Marie quickly wiped at her eyes. "I am perfectly well, Your Grace, merely in need of fresh air." He moved closer, his footsteps nearly silent on the snow-dusted stone. "You are not well, and you need not pretend otherwise, not with me." There was something in his voice that undid her carefully maintained composure. "What does it matter?" she whispered. "What does any of it matter?" Martin stopped a few feet away. "It matters because you matter. You do not know me, Your Grace." "No," he agreed. "But I know injustice when I see it. Lady Worthington had no right to treat you as she did." Marie laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Lady Worthington is merely stating what everyone thinks. I am a widow without means, without children, without value. That is not true, is it not?" Marie turned to face him fully. "My husband's cousin is taking my home. The courts will allow it because I failed in my wifely duty to produce an heir. Society scorns me because I am poor. Tell me, Your Grace, what value do I have in this world?" Martin's jaw tightened. "You have value because you exist, because you have dignity and strength and grace under impossible circumstances, because you stood in that ballroom and refused to be broken." His words struck something deep inside her, something she had thought long dead. "You see too much," she said softly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply see what others refuse to acknowledge." They stood in silence for a moment, snow falling between them, the distant sound of music drifting from the ballroom. "Why did you follow me?" Marie asked. Martin seemed to consider the question carefully. "Because I understand what it is to feel alone in a crowded room. Because I know what it is to carry grief that no one else can see." "Your wife," Marie said gently. His expression shifted, pain flickering across his features. "Eleanor. She died 3 years ago from scarlet fever. I held her as she slipped away, and I could do nothing to save her." "I am sorry," Marie whispered. "That is a terrible burden to carry." Martin looked at her then, really looked at her, and Marie saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He was someone who understood loss, who knew what it meant to have your world shattered. "They say I should remarry," he said quietly, "that the duchy requires heirs. My solicitor speaks of duty and lineage, as if love and loss are inconsequential details. And what do you say?" "I say that I am tired of duty, tired of expectations, tired of pretending that anything matters beyond this moment." The intensity in his voice sent a shiver through Marie that had nothing to do with the cold. "Your Grace," she began, but he shook his head. "Martin. Please, when we are alone, call me Martin." It was wildly improper. They had known each other for less than an hour. But standing there in the snow, with the rest of the world shut away behind glass doors, propriety seemed distant. "Martin," she said, testing the name on her tongue. It felt intimate, dangerous. "Why are you telling me this?" He took a step closer. "Because you asked, because you listen, because when I look at you, I do not see a widow without value. I see a woman who has survived with remarkable grace." Marie's heart hammered in her chest. She should step back, should return to the ballroom. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Martin's eyes held hers. "I want to know that you will be safe, that Edward will not take everything from you, that you will not disappear into obscurity because the world is too blind to see your worth. That is not your responsibility." "Perhaps not, but I find I cannot stop thinking about it, about you." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken things. Marie knew she should be cautious, should protect herself. But when she looked at Martin, she did not see manipulation. She saw a man as lonely and lost as she was, reaching out across the darkness. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Say that you will allow me to help you. Say that you will not simply accept defeat." Marie considered his words. She thought of the cottage, of Edward's cruel smile, of the future that seemed to narrow with each passing day. Then she thought of Martin's hand on her waist during the dance. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we could help each other." Martin's expression shifted, curiosity replacing some of the intensity. "How so? You need heirs. I need protection. Perhaps there is an arrangement that could benefit us both." The words hung in the air between them, audacious and impossible. Martin stared at her for a long moment, snow collecting on his dark hair, his eyes searching her face. "Are you proposing what I think you are proposing?" he asked quietly. Marie lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. "I am proposing that we consider our mutual needs with clear eyes and honest hearts. Nothing more, nothing less. A marriage of convenience, if you prefer that term." Martin was silent for so long that Marie began to fear she had overstepped catastrophically. Then slowly a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You are remarkable, Mrs. Harper. I am practical, Your Grace, a trait born of necessity." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she placed hers in it. His fingers closed around hers, warm despite the cold. "Then let us speak plainly," he said. "Tomorrow, come to Ashford House at 2 o'clock. We will discuss terms like the sensible people we are." Marie nodded, her heart racing. "Very well, 2 o'clock." They stood there a moment longer, hands clasped, snow falling around them, two souls finding unexpected possibility in the midst of winter's darkness. When Marie finally returned to the ballroom, she carried herself differently. Not with defeat, but with something that might have been hope. And Martin watched her go, wondering what exactly he had just agreed to, and why the prospect filled him not with dread, but with something dangerously close to anticipation. Marie stood in the small parlor of her cottage, staring at the velvet box in her trembling hands. The package had arrived that morning, delivered by a liveried footman wearing the Ashford crest. No card, no letter, just the box wrapped in silver paper, placed into her hands as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a duke to send gifts to a widow of no consequence. Inside, nestled on black silk, lay a pair of pearl earrings. They were exquisite. Each pearl was perfectly matched, luminous and pale as moonlight, set in delicate gold filigree. Marie had seen enough jewelry in her years among the gentry to recognize quality. These were not merely expensive, they were heirlooms. Rose, her friend and only remaining companion, gasped from the doorway. "Marie, those are extraordinary. Who sent them?" Marie closed the box quickly, her heart racing. "I do not know." It was a lie. She knew exactly who had sent them. The question was why. The meeting at Ashford House was scheduled for this afternoon. Had Martin sent these as some sort of gesture, a demonstration of what he could provide, or was it something else entirely? "You must wear them to Lady Emmeline's tea this afternoon," Rose said, moving closer to examine the box. "They would be perfect with your grey silk." Marie shook her head. "I cannot possibly wear them. It would be inappropriate." "Inappropriate," Rose laughed. "Marie, you are fighting to keep your home. You need allies, and allies notice women who wear pearls like those. Wear them. Let society see that you are not without resources." Marie wanted to argue, but Rose had a point. She was tired of being invisible, of being dismissed and pitied. Perhaps wearing the earrings would remind people that she was still a person of worth. Very well, she said quietly. I will wear them. 3 hours later, Marie stood in Lady Emmeline Thornfield's drawing room, feeling the weight of the pearls against her neck with every movement. The tea was crowded, as such events always were. 30 women packed into a space meant for 20, all dressed in their finest afternoon gowns, all eager to gossip and judge in equal measure. Marie had barely entered the room when the whispers began. Are those pearls? Where would she have gotten such jewelry? Surely they cannot be real. Marie kept her chin high, accepting a cup of tea from a servant and finding a seat near the window. Rose sat beside her, providing silent support. Lady Emmeline, their hostess, approached with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Mrs. Harper, how lovely you look. Those earrings are quite remarkable. Thank you, Lady Thornfield, Marie replied. You are kind to say so. May I ask where you acquired them? I do not believe I have seen you wear them before. Marie's mind raced. She could not claim they were her own without inviting questions about her supposed poverty. She could not mention Martin without causing a scandal. She was trapped. They were a gift, she said carefully. Lady Emmeline's eyebrows rose. A gift? How generous. From family, perhaps. Before Marie could answer, Lady Annabel's voice cut through the room like a knife. I recognize those pearls. The drawing room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Lady Annabel, who stood near the fireplace, her face flushed with malicious triumph. Those earrings, Lady Annabel continued, belonged to the late Duchess of Ashford. Eleanor Caldwell wore them at every major event. I would recognize them anywhere. Marie's blood turned to ice. Surely you are mistaken, Rose said quickly. There are many pearl earrings. Not like those, Lady Annabel insisted. Those are Ashford pearls. Which begs the question, how did Mrs. Harper come to possess them? The whispers erupted like a dam breaking. The Duke gave them to her. But why would he? What is her connection to Ashford House? Marie set down her teacup with shaking hands. She felt the room closing in, felt the weight of judgment crushing her from all sides. I am sure there is a perfectly reasonable explanation, Lady Emmeline said, though her tone suggested she believed no such thing. There is, Rose said firmly. Mrs. Harper has become acquainted with the Duke. He is assisting her with certain legal matters. Legal matters? Lady Annabel laughed. Is that what we are calling it now? The implication was clear and devastating. Marie felt heat flood her face, felt the familiar sting of humiliation. You go too far, Rose said, standing. Do I? Lady Annabel moved closer, her eyes glittering with cruelty. A widow of no means, suddenly wearing the late Duchess's pearls. A woman who danced with the Duke at Westbridge just last night. I think we all understand exactly what sort of arrangement has been made. That is enough. The voice came from the doorway, deep and commanding. Every woman in the room turned to see Martin Caldwell standing at the entrance, his expression thunderous. Marie's heart stopped. What was he doing here? Your Grace, Lady Emmeline stammered, clearly shocked by his appearance. We were not expecting you. Evidently, Martin said coldly, or perhaps Lady Worthington would have guarded her tongue more carefully. Lady Annabel paled, but lifted her chin defiantly. I merely stated what everyone is thinking, Your Grace. Mrs. Harper appears wearing your late wife's jewelry without explanation. Then allow me to provide one, Martin said, moving into the room with deliberate grace. Mrs. Harper is a friend of the House of Ashford. The earrings were a gift from my mother, who wore them long before Eleanor did. They have been in my family for 3 generations, and I chose to give them to someone worthy of such heirlooms. The room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. A friend? Lady Annabel pressed, clearly unwilling to let go of her prey. Martin's eyes hardened. Yes, a friend. And anyone who suggests otherwise will find themselves unwelcome at Ashford House and any event I attend. Am I making myself clear? Lady Annabel opened her mouth, then closed it, defeated. Mrs. Harper, Martin said, turning to Marie. Might I have a word with you? In private. Marie nodded, not trusting her voice. She stood on unsteady legs and followed him from the drawing room, feeling the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on her back. Martin led her to a small study down the hall, closing the door behind them. For a moment, they simply stood there, the silence heavy between them. I am sorry, he said finally. I did not mean to cause you embarrassment. The earrings were meant as a gesture of goodwill before our meeting this afternoon." Marie found her voice. "Your mother's earrings. A small lie to preserve your reputation. In truth, they were Eleanor's, but my mother did wear them first, so it is not entirely false." Marie sank into a chair. "You should not have come. You should not have defended me so publicly. People will talk. Let them," Martin said fiercely. "I am tired of watching you be torn apart by vultures. I am tired of pretending that cruelty is acceptable simply because it is clothed in social niceties." Marie looked up at him, seeing the anger in his eyes, the rigid set of his jaw. He had risked his reputation to defend hers. The realization made something warm unfurl in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Martin's expression softened. "You need not thank me for basic decency, Marie." He had used her given name, in private, without asking permission. It should have felt presumptuous. Instead, it felt right. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Martin said, moving closer, "we discuss the arrangement you proposed last night, because after what just occurred, I believe we both understand that time is not on our side." Marie nodded slowly. "Then, let us speak honestly, Martin. What do you truly want from this marriage?" He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "I want heirs," he said finally. "I want the duchy secured. But I also want something I did not expect. I want to protect you, to ensure that women like Lady Annabel can never hurt you again." "And what do I want?" Marie asked softly. He knelt beside her chair, bringing them eye to eye. "Tell me." Marie took a breath. "I want dignity. I want to be seen as a person, not a vessel for children. I want a voice in my own life. And I want," she hesitated, then continued, "I want to know that when this is over, when you have your heirs, I will not be cast aside." Martin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "You have my word," he said. "You will be my duchess in truth, not merely in name. And you will be cast aside never." The sincerity in his voice made Marie's throat tight with emotion. "Very well," she said. "Then I accept your proposal, Martin Caldwell." His fingers tightened around hers. "And I accept yours, Marie Harper." In that small study, with scandal swirling outside the door and an uncertain future before them, two damaged souls forged an unlikely alliance. Neither knew that what began as necessity would become something far more powerful. News of the scandal spread through London society like wildfire. By evening, everyone who mattered knew that the Duke of Ashford had publicly defended the impoverished widow Marie Harper, that he had given her pearls, that he had called her a friend of his house. Speculation ran rampant. Some whispered of romance. Others suggested a more scandalous arrangement. A few, the more perceptive ones, sensed that something significant was about to shift in the careful hierarchy of their world. Marie sat in her small parlor the following morning, reading the gossip columns with a mixture of horror and resignation. Rose had brought 3 different papers, each more lurid than the last. "Listen to this," Rose said, her voice incredulous. "The Duke of Ashford has taken a keen interest in the widow Harper. One wonders what services she provides to warrant such generosity." Marie closed her eyes. "Burn them. All of them." Rose hesitated. "Marie, perhaps you should reconsider this arrangement. Your reputation is being destroyed." "My reputation was already destroyed the moment Thomas died without leaving me an heir," Marie said quietly. "At least now I have a chance at something better than obscurity." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marie's heart leapt, then steadied. She knew who it would be. Martin entered her parlor with the easy authority of a man who owned half of England. He wore riding clothes, his dark hair slightly disheveled from the wind, and he looked tired. "Mrs. Harper," he said formally, then noticed Rose. "Miss Whitmore." Rose curtsied. "Your Grace, I shall give you privacy." She slipped from the room, closing the door but not quite all the way. Propriety demanded a chaperone, even if that chaperone remained just out of sight. Martin waited until Rose's footsteps faded before speaking. "I have come to discuss our situation." "Our situation," Marie repeated. "You mean the fact that my name is being dragged through every drawing room in London?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable, I did not anticipate the severity of the response. I thought my declaration would protect you." "It did," Marie said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Lady Annabel's accusations would have been far worse without your intervention. Now at least, people are uncertain rather than convinced of my ruin." Martin moved closer, studying her face. "You are remarkably pragmatic about this. I have learned that emotion is a luxury I cannot afford." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have scheduled the announcement for tomorrow evening, at the Pemberton Ball. We will arrive together, and I will introduce you as my future Duchess." Marie's breath caught. So soon. The longer we wait, the more damage occurs to both our reputations. Better to move swiftly and present a united front. He was right, of course. But the reality of it made her hands tremble. "There is something else," Martin continued, his tone shifting to something harder. "Something we must discuss plainly before we proceed." Marie straightened in her chair. "Very well, speak plainly." Martin moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense. "This marriage serves a purpose, Marie. A specific, essential purpose. The duchy requires heirs. Male heirs, if possible, though daughters with good marriages could secure certain alliances." "I understand," Marie said quietly. He turned to face her, and his expression was colder than she had yet seen. "Do you? Because I need to be certain there are no misunderstandings between us." "Then say what you mean to say, Martin." His jaw tightened. "You are mine until I have my heirs. That is the arrangement. You will fulfill your duty as my Duchess, and in return you will have protection, status, and security. But make no mistake about the primary purpose of this union." The words hit Marie like a physical blow. She had known this was a marriage of convenience, had proposed it herself. But hearing it stated so boldly, so coldly, stripped away any romantic illusions she might have harbored. "I see," she managed, keeping her voice steady. "You want to ensure I understand my place." "I want to ensure we both understand the terms," Martin corrected. "I will not pretend this is a love match. I will not lie to you about my expectations." Marie stood, anger giving her strength. "And what of my expectations, Your Grace? Am I merely a broodmare in your eyes? A vessel to carry your precious heirs?" Martin's expression flickered, something like guilt crossing his features. "That is not what I meant." "Is it not?" Marie moved closer, her voice low and fierce. "You speak of duty and purpose, as if I am not a person with feelings and fears of my own. You reduce our arrangement to its most transactional elements and expect me to simply accept it." "I am being honest," Martin said. "Is that not what you wanted?" "Honesty, yes. Cruelty, no." The word hung between them, sharp and accusatory. Martin's face paled. "I am not being cruel. I am being realistic." "You are protecting yourself," Marie said, understanding suddenly flooding through her. "You are making this cold and businesslike because you are afraid. Afraid that if you allow any warmth, any connection, you might feel something again. And feeling something means you could lose it." Martin's hands clenched at his sides. "You know nothing about what I fear, do I not?" Marie's voice softened despite her anger. "You loved Eleanor. You held her as she died. And now you are so terrified of that pain returning that you would rather treat me as a stranger than risk caring for me." "Stop," Martin said, but there was no force behind the word. Marie took a breath, steadying herself. "Very well. If you want honesty, here is mine. I will marry you. I will fulfill my duties as your Duchess. I will give you heirs if God permits it. But I will not be invisible, Martin. I will not be silent, and I will not be discarded once my usefulness has ended." Martin stared at her, something shifting in his dark eyes. "Those are your terms?" "Those are my terms," Marie confirmed. "I want dignity. I want respect. And I want your word that whatever happens between us, whether we produce 1 child or 10, I will remain your Duchess in truth, not merely in name." The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, Martin spoke. "You have my word." Marie searched his face, looking for deception, for hesitation. She found only exhaustion and something that might have been remorse. "Then we have an agreement," she said. Martin extended his hand, and Marie took it. His grip was firm, warm despite the coolness of the conversation. For a moment they stood there, hands clasped, two people bound by necessity and mutual need. "I did not mean to be cruel," Martin said quietly. "I only meant to be clear." "Clarity and kindness are not mutually exclusive," Marie replied. Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "You will make a formidable Duchess, Marie Harper." "I intend to," she said. Martin released her hand slowly, as if reluctant to break the contact. "Tomorrow evening, then. I will send a carriage for you at 7. Wear the pearls, I will." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Marie." She looked up. "Yes?" "Thank you for accepting my proposal despite my clumsy delivery of it." Marie felt some of her anger soften. "Thank you for offering protection despite the cost to yourself." Martin nodded once, then left, leaving Marie standing in her small parlor with her heart racing and her future suddenly, terrifyingly real. Rose appeared in the doorway moments later. "Well?" Marie sank into her chair. "We are to be married. It will be announced tomorrow evening." Rose studied her friend's face. "And how do you feel about that?" Marie was quiet for a long moment, considering the question honestly. Terrified, she admitted, but also strangely hopeful, because despite Martin's harsh words, despite his attempts to keep everything cold and transactional, Marie had seen something else in his eyes. Something vulnerable and scared and achingly human. He was protecting himself with coldness, but beneath that ice, she suspected, was a man capable of great feeling. Whether that feeling would ever extend to her remained to be seen. But Marie Harper had survived worse than an uncertain marriage. She had survived loss and poverty and humiliation. She would survive this too. And perhaps, just perhaps, she might even find something worth having in the process. The next evening would change everything. Of that she was certain. What she could not know was just how completely Martin Caldwell would upend her carefully ordered world. The Pemberton ball glittered with 1,000 candles, but Marie barely noticed the splendor. She stood beside Martin at the top of the grand staircase, his hand firm beneath her elbow, as Lord Pemberton announced them to the assembled guests, the Duke of Ashford and Mrs. Marie Harper. The whispers rose immediately, a tide of speculation and shock. Marie kept her chin high, her hand steady on Martin's arm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. They descended the stairs together, and Marie felt the weight of every eye in the ballroom. The pearls at her ears caught the candlelight, announcing her new status more clearly than words ever could. Lady Annabel stood near the refreshment table, her face tight with poorly concealed fury. Other women wore expressions ranging from envy to confusion to grudging acceptance. Martin led her to the center of the room, where the most influential members of society had gathered. Lords and ladies, politicians and socialites all waited to assess the woman who would become the next Duchess of Ashford. "Lord Ashton," Martin said, his voice carrying authority, "may I present Mrs. Harper? We are to be married within the month." "Congratulations, Your Grace," Lord Ashton said, though his eyes remained calculating. "This is quite unexpected." "The best things often are," Martin replied smoothly. For the next hour, Marie endured introduction after introduction, question after question, judgment disguised as curiosity. Martin remained at her side throughout, a solid presence that kept her anchored even as the social currents threatened to sweep her away. But the strain was evident. Marie saw it in the tightness around Martin's mouth, in the way his shoulders grew more rigid with each passing minute. Finally, she leaned close and whispered, "I need air." Martin glanced down at her, concern flickering in his dark eyes. "The gardens?" She nodded. He guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, ignoring the speculative looks that followed them. The terrace doors opened onto a winter garden, paths lined with lanterns glowing softly in the darkness. Snow had fallen earlier, leaving everything dusted with white. They walked in silence for several minutes, their breath misting in the cold air. Marie pulled her shawl tighter, grateful for the quiet after the overwhelming noise of the ballroom. "You handled that well," Martin said finally. "Better than I expected." "Did you expect me to collapse?" Marie asked, more amused than offended. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "No, but I know how exhausting such scrutiny can be." They reached a small fountain, its water frozen into sculptural silence. Marie stopped, turning to face him. "We need to talk," she said. "Truly talk, not dance around what we both know must be said." Martin's expression grew guarded. "What do you wish to discuss?" "Us. This marriage. The reality of what we are agreeing to." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. What are your concerns?" Marie took a breath, gathering her courage. "Yesterday, you told me I am yours until you have your heirs. That phrase has haunted me, Martin. It suggests I am temporary, disposable once my purpose is fulfilled." "That was not my intention," he said quietly. "Then what was your intention?" Martin turned away, staring at the frozen fountain. "To be honest, to avoid deception. I have seen too many marriages built on false promises and romantic fantasies that crumble under the weight of reality. And you think honesty requires cruelty? I think honesty requires clarity." His voice was strained. "The duchy needs heirs. That is not romantic, but it is true. I will not pretend otherwise simply to make you feel better." Marie moved closer, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. "What are you so afraid of, Martin?" He flinched as if she had struck him. "I am not afraid. You are terrified," Marie said gently. "I see it every time you speak of this marriage. Every time you remind me of duty and purpose. You are building walls between us before we even begin." Martin's hands clenched at his sides. "You do not understand. Then help me understand." The silence stretched between them, broken only by distant music drifting from the ballroom. For a long moment, Marie thought he would not answer. Then slowly, the words began to come. "Eleanor was ill for 4 days, Martin said, his voice barely above a whisper. 4 days. She woke with a fever on Monday morning. By Friday evening, she was gone. I held her hand through all of it, watched her grow weaker with each passing hour, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing." Marie's throat tightened. "I am so sorry. The physicians said it was scarlet fever, swift and merciless." He closed his eyes. "In those final hours, she begged me to remarry, to have children, to not let the duchy die with me. She made me promise, and you have carried that promise like a stone ever since." Martin opened his eyes, and Marie saw raw pain there. "I loved her, Marie, completely, and loving her, losing her nearly destroyed me. I swore I would never allow myself to feel that way again, never be that vulnerable." Marie understood then, understood the harshness, the cold, transactional language, the walls he built so carefully. He was not cruel. He was protecting himself from unbearable pain. "So you propose a marriage without feeling," she said softly. "Without connection. A transaction that fulfills Eleanor's dying wish without risking your heart." "Yes," Martin admitted. Marie was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she moved closer, until they stood only inches apart. "May I tell you what I think?" He nodded, wariness in his eyes. "I think you are punishing yourself," Marie said. "I think you believe that if you never love again, you will never hurt again. But Martin, you are already hurting. You have been hurting for 3 years. Denying yourself connection will not ease that pain. It will only make you lonelier." His jaw tightened. "You speak as if you know me." "I speak as someone who understands loss," Marie replied. "My marriage to Thomas was cold and loveless. He treated me as an obligation, a duty to be fulfilled. I know what it is to live with someone and still be utterly alone. I will not enter another such marriage willingly." "What are you saying?" Marie lifted her chin, meeting his eyes directly. "I am saying that if we do this, we do it honestly. Not your version of honesty, which is simply armor against feeling. Real honesty. We acknowledge that this is difficult, that we are both scared, that we are taking a risk." Martin stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "And if I cannot give you love?" "I am not asking for love," Marie said. "Not yet, perhaps not ever. But I am asking for respect, for kindness, for the possibility that we might become genuine partners rather than strangers sharing a house and a name." The snow began to fall again, soft flakes catching in Marie's hair, on Martin's shoulders. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering near her face, then gently brushed a snowflake from her cheek. The touch was feather-light, but it sent warmth through Marie's entire body. "You're asking me to lower my defenses," Martin said quietly. "I am asking you to be human with me," Marie replied. "To stop treating this as a business arrangement and acknowledge that we are two people who will share a life together. However, that life unfolds." Martin's hand lingered against her cheek, his thumb tracing a gentle line along her jaw. His eyes searched hers, and Marie saw the battle raging within him, fear warring with longing, self-protection battling against the human need for connection. "I do not know if I can be what you need," he finally said. "Then we will discover it together," Marie answered. "One day at a time." For a long moment they stood there in the falling snow, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Then Martin leaned forward, his forehead resting gently against hers. "Very well," he whispered. "We try, truly try, not merely to fulfill duty, but to build something real." Marie's breath caught. "You mean it?" "I mean it." Relief flooded through her, mixed with something warmer. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. "Before we return," Marie said softly, "there is one more thing I need to say. The CTA would naturally fit here, but let me share something first. I need to know that when you look at me, you see Marie. Not a replacement for Eleanor, not merely a duchess. Me." Martin pulled back slightly, his hands moving to cup her face gently. "I see you, Marie Harper. I see your strength and your courage and your refusal to accept less than you deserve. I see you clearly." The words settled into her heart like warmth after cold. If you are enjoying this story, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to this channel. And tell me, have you ever faced a choice between safety and the possibility of something more? Leave a comment sharing where you are listening from. Your presence here means everything. "Now," Marie said, her voice steadier than she felt, "shall we return to the ballroom and face society together?" Martin smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. Together. He offered his arm, and Marie took it. As they walked back toward the light and music, Marie felt something shift between them. They were still standing on uncertain ground, still navigating the complex terrain of a marriage built on necessity rather than love. But for the first time, she believed they might actually have a chance. 3 weeks later, Marie stood in the small chapel at Ashford House, wearing a gown of ivory silk that had been made specifically for her. The ceremony was intimate. No grand cathedral filled with hundreds of guests. No elaborate reception that would last until dawn. Martin had insisted on discretion, and Marie had agreed. This marriage was real, but it remained fragile. Better to begin quietly than to invite the scrutiny of all London. Rose stood as her witness. Martin's solicitor, Mr. Edwards, served as his. The priest spoke the ancient words, his voice echoing softly in the stone chapel. "Do you, Martin James Caldwell, Duke of Ashford, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Martin said, his voice steady. The priest turned to Marie. "And do you, Marie Elizabeth Harper, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Marie looked up at Martin, meeting his dark eyes. In them, she saw uncertainty mixed with something that might have been hope. "I do," she said clearly. Martin slipped a ring onto her finger. It was a beautiful thing, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, clearly an heirloom. His hands were steady, but Marie felt the slight tremor in his fingers as they touched hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest said. The words settled over them like a blessing and a weight in equal measure. Martin leaned forward, and Marie tilted her face up. Their first kiss as husband and wife was gentle, brief, but there was warmth in it, a promise of possibility. When they pulled apart, Marie saw something shift in Martin's expression. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance that this marriage might be more than mere duty. The wedding breakfast was held in the smaller dining room at Ashford House. The table seated only 6, but it felt appropriate. Rose and Mr. Edwards offered toasts. Martin's housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, had prepared an elegant meal that Marie barely tasted. She was too aware of Martin beside her, of the ring on her finger, of the fact that she was now the Duchess of Ashford, with all the responsibility and expectation that title carried. After the meal, Rose embraced Marie tightly. "Be happy," she whispered. "You deserve happiness." "I will try," Marie promised. When the guests had departed, Marie found herself standing in the grand entrance hall of Ashford House, suddenly uncertain. This was her home now. These rooms, these servants, this life. And the man standing across from her was her husband. "Mrs. Winters will show you to your chambers," Martin said, his tone formal again. "You must be tired." Marie recognized the retreat in his voice, the pulling back into safety and distance. But she remembered their conversation in the snow, his promise to truly try. "Martin," she said softly. He paused, turning back to her. "Thank you," she said, "for today. For making it beautiful despite the circumstances." Something softened in his expression. "You are welcome, Marie." The use of her given name felt intimate, deliberate. A small gesture, but meaningful. Mrs. Winters, a plump woman with kind eyes, led Marie through the house. "The Duchess's chambers are connected to the Duke's suite by a sitting room," she explained. "You will have privacy when you wish it, but you may also be together when appropriate." The chambers were magnificent. A large bedroom with a canopied bed, a dressing room filled with gowns that had been made for her, and a sitting room with windows overlooking the gardens. Everything spoke of wealth and taste, so different from her modest cottage. Marie dismissed the maid who had begun to unpack her few belongings. She needed a moment alone to process the enormity of what had just occurred. She was married. To a duke. To a man she barely knew, but was beginning to understand. A soft knock at the connecting door made her turn. "Come in." Martin entered slowly, having changed from his formal coat into a simpler jacket. He looked less intimidating this way, more human. "I wanted to ensure you were comfortable," he said. "That you have everything you need." "I do," Marie replied. "Mrs. Winters has been very kind." They stood there awkwardly, two people who had just pledged their lives to one another, yet remained virtual strangers. "This is strange," Marie admitted. "Is it not?" Martin's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Exceedingly strange." Marie laughed, and the sound broke some of the tension. Martin moved further into the room, his eyes taking in the space that was now hers. "I want you to feel at home here," he said, "to change anything you wish. These are your chambers, your domain. I will not intrude unless invited." Marie appreciated the gesture, but it also saddened her. Always the boundaries, always the careful distance. "Martin," she said gently, "we are married now. You need not treat me as a guest in your home." He met her eyes. "I am trying to be respectful, I know, but perhaps, sometimes, respect looks like connection rather than distance." Martin was quiet for a moment, then moved to sit in one of the chairs by the fireplace. "May I stay? Just for a while?" Marie felt warmth bloom in her chest. Of course. She sat across from him, and they talked. Not about duty or heirs or social expectations. They talked about small things. Martin told her about his childhood, about learning to ride in these very gardens, about his father's stern expectations and his mother's gentle wisdom. Marie shared stories of her own youth, of her parents who had died too young, of Thomas and the lonely years of that first marriage. As the afternoon light faded to evening, they moved closer. Not physically, but emotionally. The walls Martin had built so carefully began to crack, just slightly. "I was afraid today," Martin admitted, as darkness gathered outside. "Afraid that I was repeating a mistake, binding myself to someone when I swore I never would again." "And now?" Marie asked. "Now," he said slowly, "I find that fear is still present, but so is something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or hope that I am not as broken as I believed." "You are not broken," Marie said firmly. "You are wounded. There is a difference." Martin looked at her then with such raw vulnerability that Marie's breath caught. "How do you do that? See through my defenses so easily?" "Perhaps because I have my own defenses," Marie replied. "I recognize the armor because I wear it too." He stood slowly and crossed to where she sat. For a moment he simply looked down at her, his dark eyes searching. Then carefully he extended his hand. Marie placed her hand in his, and he drew her to her feet. They stood close, closer than propriety would usually allow, But they were married now. They were allowed this closeness. Martin lifted his free hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, almost reverent. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "How to be a husband again, how to let someone in." Marie's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. "Then we learn together. One moment at a time." Martin's hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing along her jaw. "May I kiss you? Properly this time?" Marie's heart raced. Yes. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. But Marie did not pull away. When his lips met hers, it was different from the chaste kiss in the chapel. This kiss was deeper, searching, full of questions they did not yet have words for. Marie's hands moved to his shoulders, steadying herself as the world seemed to tilt. Martin's arm came around her waist, drawing her closer, and for a moment they were simply two people finding connection in the midst of uncertainty. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing harder. Martin rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cradling her face. "That was," he began, then seemed at a loss for words. "A beginning," Marie finished softly. "Yes," Martin agreed. "A beginning." They stood there for a long moment, neither wanting to break the spell. Then Martin stepped back reluctantly. "I should let you rest," he said. "It has been a long day." Marie nodded, though part of her wanted to ask him to stay longer, but she understood. They were taking small steps, building trust gradually. Rushing would only damage what they were carefully constructing. "Good night, Martin," she said. "Good night, Marie." He moved toward the connecting door, then paused. "Marie?" "Yes? I am glad you are here. I am glad you are my wife." The simple honesty in his words made Marie's throat tight. "I am glad too." After he left, Marie stood in her new chambers, touching her lips where his had been, feeling the ring on her finger, and marveling at how much her life had changed in so short a time. She was a duchess now, but more than that, she was beginning to believe she might also become something she had never expected, a true partner to the complicated, wounded, carefully guarded man who was now her husband. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing Ashford House in white. Inside, two lonely souls had taken their first real steps toward one another. What would come next remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, Marie felt something that had been absent from her life for far too long. Hope. 2 weeks into their marriage, Marie discovered that living with Martin was both easier and harder than she had anticipated. Easier because he was unfailingly courteous, respectful of her space and time. He consulted her on household matters, introduced her properly to the staff, ensured she wanted for nothing. Harder because the distance he maintained was maddening. They shared meals, took walks in the gardens, discussed books and current events. But always, there remained a careful space between them, a boundary Martin would not cross. Marie understood his fear, but understanding did not make the loneliness any less acute. Tonight, unable to sleep, she wandered through the quiet house in her dressing gown, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The library drew her, its warmth and familiar smell of leather and paper offering comfort. She found Martin there. He sat in a leather chair near the fireplace, still dressed despite the late hour, a book forgotten in his lap. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Marie," he said, rising. "I did not expect anyone to be awake." "I could not sleep," she admitted. "I hope I am not intruding." "Never," Martin said, gesturing to the chair opposite his. "Please join me." Marie settled into the chair, tucking her feet beneath her. The fire crackled softly between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "What keeps you awake?" Martin asked after a moment. Marie considered lying, offering some polite excuse, but they had promised honesty, real honesty. "You?" she said simply. Martin's eyes widened slightly. "I've disturbed you." "Not disturbed. Confused, perhaps." Marie pulled her shawl tighter. "We are married, Martin. We share a home, meals, conversations, but we remain strangers in the ways that matter most." Martin set his book aside, his expression troubled. "I thought I was giving you time, space to adjust. You are giving me distance, Marie corrected gently, and I begin to wonder if it is truly for my benefit or for yours. The truth of her words hung in the air between them. Martin stood abruptly, moving to the fireplace, his back to her. You are right, of course, I am protecting myself. I told you I would try, and yet I find myself retreating at every opportunity. Marie rose and moved closer, stopping a few feet behind him. What frightens you so much about letting me in? Martin was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, he began to speak. When Eleanor died, I felt as though someone had carved out my chest and left me hollow. The pain was physical, Marie. I could not eat, could not sleep. For months I merely existed, and I swore I would never allow myself to feel that deeply again, because I could not survive losing someone like that twice. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. Marie moved closer, close enough to rest her hand gently on his shoulder. But you are not living, Martin. You are merely avoiding death. There is a difference. He turned then, and Marie saw tears in his eyes that he was fighting to contain. I do not know how to do anything else. Marie's heart ached for him, for the man so trapped by grief that he could not see a way forward. May I tell you about Thomas? She asked softly. Martin nodded, seemingly grateful for the shift in focus. They both sat back down, closer this time, their knees almost touching. Thomas married me because his father insisted he needed a wife, Marie began. I was young and naive enough to believe affection might grow with time. It did not. He was never cruel exactly, but he was absent. Even when we shared a room, he was elsewhere. His business, his club, his own thoughts, anything but me. She paused, the old pain still present, but less sharp now. For 5 years, I lived with a man who saw me as an obligation, who touched me only when duty demanded it, and even then with such obvious reluctance that I felt like an imposition on his life. When he died, I grieved, not for him but for the years I had wasted hoping he might see me as a person, rather than a burden. Martin reached out and took her hand. I am sorry you endured that. Marie squeezed his fingers. I tell you this, not for pity, but so you understand. I will not live that way again, Martin. I would rather have your anger, your fear, your honest struggle than your polite distance. If we are to build something real, I need you to be real with me. Martin stared at their joined hands. What if I hurt you? What if you do not? Marie countered. What if we build something beautiful and lasting? What if we waste the possibility of happiness because we are too afraid to try? You make it sound simple. It is not simple, Marie agreed. It is terrifying. But so is the alternative, living separate lives under the same roof. That is a special kind of death, Martin. I have lived it once. I cannot do so again. Martin lifted his eyes to hers, and Marie saw the battle raging within him. Fear and longing, self-protection and desperate need for connection. I do not know if I can give you what you need, he said, his voice rough. Then give me what you can, Marie said. Give me honesty. Give me your true self, even when it is messy and scared. Give me the chance to know the man beneath the title and the grief. Martin's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, and Marie felt warmth spread through her from that simple touch. I find myself thinking of you constantly, he admitted quietly. When I wake, I wonder if you slept well. During meals, I watch how the light catches in your hair. In the evenings, I stand at the connecting door between our rooms, wanting to knock but afraid of what it might mean if I do. Marie's breath caught. Martin. I want to be close to you, he continued, the words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken. I want to know what makes you laugh, what you think about when you believe no one is watching. I want, he paused, his eyes darkening. I want to touch you not from duty but from desire. And that terrifies me, because desire leads to attachment, and attachment leads to loss. Or, Marie said softly, it leads to something worth having, something worth the risk. She stood slowly, and Martin rose with her. They stood close now, close enough that Marie could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest. Marie, he breathed, his voice thick with warning and want in equal measure. She reached up, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his face. His jaw was rough with stubble, warm beneath her palm. Martin's eyes closed at the contact, and a shudder ran through him. Tell me to stop, Marie whispered, And I will." Martin's eyes opened, burning with intensity. "Do not stop." She rose on her toes, closing the distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, Martin remained still. Then, with a sound that was half groan, half surrender, he pulled her against him. His arms came around her waist, strong and sure, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole Marie's breath. This was nothing like their previous kisses. This was fire and need, and 3 years of denied feeling pouring out all at once. Martin's hands moved into her hair, scattering pins as he angled her head to deepen the kiss. Marie's fingers clutched at his shoulders, holding on as the world tilted and reformed around them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Martin rested his forehead against hers, his hands still tangled in her hair. "Marie," he said, his voice shaking, "I cannot. If we begin this, I do not know if I can maintain distance." "Then do not," Marie replied. "Martin, I am your wife. I want to be your wife in truth, not merely in name." His hands moved to frame her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Are you certain? Because if we cross this line, I do not think I can return to how things were." "I do not want to return," Marie said. "I want to move forward, with you." Martin searched her eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation. He must have found only certainty because he kissed her again, slower this time, but no less intense. "Not tonight," he said when they parted, his voice rough. "Not like this," rushed and without thought. "You deserve better." Marie felt disappointment war with appreciation for his consideration. "When? Then?" "Soon," Martin promised. "When we are both ready. When it is right." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Marie rested her head against his chest, hearing his heart race beneath her ear. They stood that way for a long time, holding each other in the firelight, two people who had been alone for far too long finally finding shelter in one another. When they finally parted, Martin walked Marie to her chambers, his hand warm in hers. At her door, he kissed her once more, gentle and full of promise. "Good night, Marie. Good night, Martin." She watched him walk to his own chambers, then closed her door and leaned against it, her heart full. Something had shifted tonight. The walls had cracked, perhaps even crumbled, and beneath the fear and grief and careful distance, Marie had found a man capable of deep feeling, of passion, of connection. He was not healed, neither was she. But they were healing each other slowly, in ways neither had expected. And that, Marie thought as she climbed into bed, was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time since their wedding, Marie fell asleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. 3 days after their confession in the library, the tension between Marie and Martin had become almost unbearable. They circled each other like magnets pulled by opposing forces. At breakfast, their fingers would brush reaching for the same teacup, and the contact would send electricity through both of them. In the gardens, Martin would place his hand on the small of Marie's back to guide her along a path, and she would feel the warmth of his touch long after he moved away. They were waiting. Both knew it, but neither seemed willing to take the final step. Until tonight. Marie sat at her dressing table, her maid having just left after helping her prepare for bed. She wore a nightgown of pale blue silk, far more elegant than anything she had owned before her marriage. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and she found herself staring at her reflection, wondering if Martin found her beautiful. A soft knock at the connecting door made her heart leap. "Come in," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Martin entered slowly. He wore a dark robe over his nightshirt, his feet bare, his hair slightly disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it. He looked younger this way, less the imposing duke, and more simply, a man. "May I sit with you?" he asked. "Of course." He settled into the chair near her fireplace, and Marie joined him, curling into the opposite chair, as had become their custom during late-night conversations. But tonight felt different. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with unspoken desire and possibility. "I have been thinking," Martin began, his eyes on the fire rather than on her, "about what you said, about not wanting to be seen merely as a vessel for heirs." Marie's breath caught. "And?" And you were right to demand more. He turned to look at her then, his dark eyes intense. I have been treating this marriage as a transaction, as a duty to be fulfilled. But you are not a duty, Marie. You are a woman I find myself caring for more with each passing day. Martin, she whispered. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, tension evident in every line of his body. I thought I could keep this clinical, practical, that we could fulfill our obligations without emotional entanglement. But I find that impossible. You have become entangled in every part of my life in ways I did not anticipate and cannot seem to control. Is that so terrible? Marie asked, rising to stand near him. It terrifies me, he admitted, because caring means vulnerability, and vulnerability means the possibility of devastating loss. Marie moved closer until she stood directly in front of him. Martin, look at me. He did. And Marie saw fear and desire warring in his expression. I cannot promise you that we will never experience loss, she said gently. Life offers no such guarantees, but I can promise you that if you continue to hold yourself apart, you will lose something certain. This moment, this connection, the possibility of building something beautiful together. Martin's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle. You make me want to believe that is possible. Then believe it, Marie urged. Take the risk with me. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Martin leaned down and kissed her, soft and searching, as if trying to communicate everything he could not put into words. Marie responded immediately, her arms coming around his neck, her body pressing closer to his. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and Martin's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Marie, Martin said, his voice rough. If we continue, I do not know if I can stop. Marie looked up at him, seeing the desire in his eyes, feeling the tremor in his hands where they rested on her waist. She wanted this, wanted him. But something in his expression gave her pause. This is not about HEIRS, is it? She asked softly. This is about us. Martin's eyes closed. It should be about HEIRS. That was the arrangement. But it is not, Marie pressed. Martin, if we are intimate tonight, I need to know it is because you want me, not because you are fulfilling some obligation. He opened his eyes, and Marie saw raw vulnerability there. I do want you. God help me. I want you so much it terrifies me. But I also feel as though I am betraying Eleanor, as though moving forward with you means forgetting her. Marie's heart ached for him. Oh, Martin, moving forward does not mean forgetting. It means honoring what you had by allowing yourself to live again. How can you be so certain? Because I lived in a marriage without love, without genuine connection. Marie took his hand, pressing it over her heart. I know the difference between existing and truly living. And I refuse to simply exist ever again. If you are not ready, truly ready to be present with me, then I would rather wait. Martin stared at her, something shifting in his expression. You would wait? Even though you want this too? I would wait, Marie confirmed. Because when we come together, Martin, I want it to be real, not shadowed by guilt or obligation or fear. I want you to be fully mine, as I will be fully yours. His thumb stroked along her jaw, his eyes searching hers. You are remarkable, do you know that? I am practical, Marie said with a small smile, and honest about what I need. Martin pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Marie rested her head against his chest. They stood that way for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of her chambers. I am not ready, Martin finally admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I want to be, but I find myself paralyzed between past and present, unable to fully commit to either. Then we wait, Marie said simply. You are not angry. She pulled back to look up at him. Martin, I would rather have one night with you fully present than 100 nights with you going through motions while your heart remains locked away. His hands moved into her hair, tilting her face up. I do not deserve you. You deserve happiness, Marie corrected. We both do. And we will find it. In time. Martin kissed her again, slower this time, tender and full of gratitude. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Will you let me stay with you tonight?" he asked. "Not for that, but simply to hold you, to sleep beside you. I find I do not want to be alone anymore." Marie felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I would like that very much." They moved to the bed, and Martin helped her in before climbing in beside her. He pulled her into his arms, her back against his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. "Marie," he said softly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for your patience, for understanding what I cannot yet give." Marie laced her fingers through his. "Thank you for your honesty, for not pretending to be ready when you are not." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound their breathing gradually synchronizing. "Tell me about Eleanor," Marie said softly. "Not about her death, but about her life. Who was she?" Martin was quiet for so long Marie thought he might not answer. Then slowly, he began to speak. She was kind, endlessly kind. She volunteered at the charity hospital, brought food to tenants who were struggling. She laughed easily and loved music. He paused. "She would have liked you, I think, would have appreciated your strength and your refusal to accept less than you deserve." Marie felt tears prick her eyes. "She sounds wonderful." "She was," Martin said. "And loving her, losing her, taught me that the human heart can endure far more than we believe possible. But it also taught me that we are more fragile than we pretend, that loss can shatter us in ways we never fully repair. But we can heal," Marie said gently. "Not back to what we were, but into something new, something that incorporates the scars, but is not defined by them." Martin's arm tightened around her. "You give me hope, Marie Harper Caldwell. Hope I thought I had lost forever." Marie turned in his arms so she could see his face in the dim firelight. "And you give me something I never had in my first marriage. A true partner, someone who sees me and values me." Martin kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then her lips, gentle and sweet. "Sleep," he murmured. "I will be here when you wake." "Promise?" "Promise." Marie settled back into his embrace, feeling safe and cherished in a way she never had before. They had not consummated their marriage tonight, but they had done something perhaps more important. They had chosen honesty over performance, genuine connection over obligation. And as Marie drifted towards sleep, Martin's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she knew they had made the right choice. When the time came, when they finally came together as husband and wife in all ways, it would be real. It would be a choice made from desire and trust and genuine feeling. It would be worth waiting for. Outside, the night was cold and dark. But in Marie's chambers, wrapped in each other's arms, two wounded souls found warmth and comfort, and the beginning of something neither had dared hope for. Not just a marriage, but a partnership built on truth, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable with another human being. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had each other. And for now, that was enough. A week passed after the night Martin held Marie in his arms without claiming his marital rights. They fell into a new rhythm, breakfasts where their eyes met over coffee cups, afternoons walking the estate, evenings in the library reading side by side. And every night, Martin came to her chambers. They would talk for hours, sharing stories and fears and dreams. Then he would hold her as they slept, his body curved protectively around hers. It was sweet. It was tender, and Marie found herself falling deeper with each passing day. But the tension remained. Every touch, every kiss, every moment they held back left them both aching, until Edward Harper forced the issue. The letter arrived on a grey morning. Marie read it in the breakfast room, her hands trembling as she absorbed the contents. Martin entered just as she set the letter down. "What is it?" Marie handed it to him wordlessly. Martin's expression darkened as he read. Edward was challenging the marriage, claiming Marie had manipulated Martin for financial gain. He demanded an investigation and threatened to bring the matter before Parliament. "This is absurd," Martin said, anger tightening his voice. "We will fight this." "He means to destroy me," Marie said quietly. "Even in marriage, I am not safe from him." Martin knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. He will not succeed. I will not allow it. But Marie saw something else in the letter. Edward was questioning whether the marriage had been consummated, whether it was valid at all. Marie looked at Martin, seeing the same realization dawn in his eyes. "He cannot prove anything," Martin said firmly. "Our marriage is legal and binding." "But it is not complete," Marie said softly. "Not in the eyes of the law." Martin's jaw tightened. "I will not be intimate with you because of legal maneuvering. When we come together, it will be because we both want it, not because Edward Harper is attempting blackmail." Marie turned to face him fully. "And what if I do want it? What if I am tired of waiting for the perfect moment that may never come? What if I simply want my husband here and now, without hesitation or fear?" Martin's eyes darkened. "Marie." She reached up, cupping his face. "I am not asking you to forget Eleanor. I am asking you to be present with me, to stop holding back because you are afraid of what feeling might cost you." His hands came up to cover hers. "And if I hurt you, then you hurt me," Marie said simply. "But I would rather risk pain than continue in this limbo. I want you, not someday, now." Something in Martin's expression cracked. The careful control he maintained began to crumble. "Marie, if we do this, there is no going back." "I do not want to go back," Marie whispered. "I want to move forward. With you." Martin pulled her against him, his mouth crashing down on hers with a hunger that stole her breath. This kiss was different. This was surrender. This was a man finally allowing himself to feel without reservation. Marie responded with equal fervor, her hands moving into his hair, her body pressing against his. She felt Martin's control slip, felt the tremor in his hands as they moved down her back. "Not here," he said roughly against her lips. "Your chambers, now." They moved through the house, trying to maintain propriety, but failing. Martin kept stopping to kiss her, pressing her against walls, his breathing ragged. Marie's fingers worked at the buttons of his waistcoat, impatient with the layers between them. By the time they reached her chambers and locked the door, they were both desperate. Martin's hands moved to the fastenings of her dress, his fingers trembling. "May I?" "Yes," Marie breathed. "Please." He undid each button with aching slowness, pressing kisses to each inch of skin he revealed. Marie's head fell back, her breath coming in short gasps. When her dress finally pulled at her feet, Martin stepped back to look at her. "You are exquisite," he said, his voice rough with desire. Marie reached for him, pulling him back. "Your turn." She helped him out of his coat, his waistcoat, his shirt. Her hands trembled as she touched his bare chest, feeling the warmth of his skin, the rapid beat of his heart. Martin lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed. He laid her down gently, then stretched out beside her, his hand moving to cup her face. "Are you certain?" he asked one final time. "I have never been more certain of anything," Marie replied. Martin kissed her again, deep and searching, and Marie felt the last of his walls finally collapse. His hands moved over her body with reverence and growing confidence, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. When he finally removed the remaining barriers between them, she did not feel exposed. She felt cherished, desired, seen in ways she never had been before. "Martin," she whispered as his lips traced along her collarbone. "Tell me if I should stop," he murmured against her skin. "Do not stop," Marie said, her hands tightening in his hair. "Please do not stop." He continued his exploration, his mouth and hands worshipping her with an intensity that left her trembling. When he finally moved over her, his body settling between her thighs, he paused. "I love you," he said, the words sounding torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I did not mean to. I tried not to. But I love you, Marie." Tears sprang to Marie's eyes. "I love you too. So much it frightens me." "Then let us be frightened together," Martin said, and kissed her as their bodies finally joined. There was a moment of adjustment, quickly replaced by a sense of rightness so profound it took Marie's breath away. This was not duty. This was two people choosing each other, completely and without reservation. They moved together, learning each other's rhythms, discovering what brought pleasure. Martin was gentle but passionate, attentive to her responses. Marie clung to him, overwhelmed by sensation and emotion. Every touch felt significant, every kiss a promise. When pleasure finally crested, washing over them both, it felt like more than physical release. It felt like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing hard. Martin held her close, his face buried in her hair, and Marie felt him shaking slightly. "Are you well?" she asked softly. "More than well," Martin said, his voice thick. "I feel alive, Marie. For the first time in 3 years, I feel truly alive." Marie turned in his arms to see his face. She was startled to see tears on his cheeks. "Martin," he smiled, even as more tears fell. "These are not tears of sadness. These are relief or gratitude. I did not think I could feel this way again, did not think I deserved to." Marie wiped his tears away with gentle fingers. "You deserve happiness, Martin. We both do." He kissed her softly. "I was so afraid of losing you that I nearly lost you by holding back. But no more. No more walls. No more distance. I am yours, Marie. Completely. And I am yours," Marie replied. "Always." As Marie dressed for dinner later, Martin came behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "We should respond to Edward's letter," he said. "Make it clear that our marriage is valid in every possible way." Marie leaned back against him. "Let him challenge us. Let all of London gossip. I do not care anymore. I have you. That is all that matters." Martin turned her in his arms. "I will protect you from him, from anyone who tries to hurt you." "I know," Marie said. "But I also know I can protect myself. Together, we are stronger than any threat Edward Harper can muster." Martin smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. Together, he agreed. That night they slept again in each other's arms. But everything had changed. The last barriers had fallen. The fears that had kept them apart had been faced and overcome. What began as a marriage of necessity had become something neither had anticipated. A true partnership, a genuine love, a connection that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Edward would not give up easily. Society would continue to judge. Life would bring its inevitable trials. But Marie and Martin would face them together. Not as two separate people bound by legal contract, but as true partners, united by choice and love, and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. The transformation was complete. The Duke, who had sworn never to love again, had opened his heart. The widow who had accepted loneliness had found genuine connection. And in choosing each other freely and completely, they had found something worth more than titles or wealth or social standing. They had found home. 2 months after their marriage was consummated, Edward Harper made his move. He arrived at Ashford House on a cold March morning, flanked by 2 solicitors and carrying a leather folder thick with documents. Martin received word from his butler and immediately sent for Marie. She found him in his study, his expression grim but determined. "Edward is here," Martin said without preamble. "He has brought what he claims is evidence that our marriage was fraudulent. He demands an audience." Marie felt her stomach tighten, though whether from nerves or the nausea that had plagued her for the past week she could not say. "Then let us face him together," she said firmly. Martin moved to her side, taking her hand. "Are you certain? I can handle this alone." "We are partners," Marie replied. "We face this together." They descended to the main drawing room where Edward waited. He looked prosperous in expensive clothes, his expression smug and confident. Behind him, his solicitors shuffled papers with practiced efficiency. "Cousin Marie," Edward said with false warmth, "or should I say, Your Grace? Though I suspect that title may soon be in question." "State your business, Edward," Martin said coldly, "and make it quick." Edward smiled, clearly enjoying himself. "I have evidence that this marriage was arranged solely for financial gain. That Mrs. Harper," he emphasized the name deliberately, "manipulated Your Grace into a hasty union to escape her debts and retain property that rightfully belongs to me." "That is a lie," Marie said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Is it?" Edward pulled documents from his folder. "I have sworn statements from servants at Westbridge Manor claiming you pursued the Duke shamelessly. I have records showing your desperate financial situation. I have even found the jeweler who valued those pearls you wore so boldly." Martin's jaw tightened. "You have nothing but gossip and circumstantial evidence." "I have enough to raise questions," Edward countered. "Questions about whether this marriage is valid, whether it was properly consummated, whether it serves any purpose beyond rescuing a destitute widow from her proper station." The insult hung in the air like poison. "You go too far," Martin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Edward turned to Marie, his expression triumphant. "Come now, cousin. We both know you sought this marriage as an escape, that you manipulated a grieving man into believing you could replace his dead wife. Surely the Duke deserves better than a calculating social climber." Marie felt rage surge through her, hot and cleansing. She stepped forward, her chin high. "You want the truth, Edward. The truth is that I did seek this marriage. I was honest about my circumstances and my needs. Martin offered protection and I accepted. But what we have built is something you cannot comprehend because you have never cared for anyone beyond yourself." Edward's smile faltered slightly. Marie continued, her voice growing stronger. "You speak of my proper station as if poverty and helplessness are virtues for a woman. As if I should have gracefully accepted losing my home, my security, my future, simply because you wanted to claim what was never yours." "That property belonged to Thomas," Edward protested. "Thomas chose to leave it to me," Marie said. "You could not accept that decision, so you have spent 2 years trying to destroy me. But I am still here, Edward, and I am stronger than you ever imagined." Martin moved to stand beside her, his hand coming to rest on the small of her back. "My wife speaks truth. This marriage may have begun as an arrangement, but it has become something far more valuable. We have built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection, something you clearly cannot understand." Edward's face reddened. "Pretty words, Your Grace, but the law requires more than affection. It requires legitimate union and legitimate heirs. Can you prove this marriage has been properly consummated? Can you prove there is any possibility of children?" The question was vulgar, designed to embarrass and diminish, but Martin did not flinch. "Our marriage is valid in every legal and physical sense. We have fulfilled all requirements and, frankly, our private life is none of your concern." "Is it not?" Edward pressed. "Because if this marriage produces no heirs, if it serves only to elevate a commoner to a position she does not deserve, then I would argue it is a fraud perpetrated against your family name and the dignity of the peerage itself." Marie felt something snap inside her. "Enough." Her voice cut through the room with such authority that even Edward paused. "You want proof that this marriage is real?" Marie said. "You want evidence that we have built something legitimate and lasting? Then hear this, Edward Harper. I carry the Duke's child. Your challenge comes too late. The succession is secured, and you have lost." The room fell utterly silent. Martin turned to stare at her, shock and wonder transforming his face. "Marie." She met his eyes, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "I was going to tell you tonight. I only became certain yesterday. But I will not let this man use my silence as a weapon against us." Edward's face had gone white. You cannot prove that." "I can," Marie said calmly. "Dr. Harrison confirmed it yesterday afternoon. I am approximately 8 weeks along. If you doubt me, I invite you to consult with him yourself, though I suspect even you would not stoop so low as to question a physician's diagnosis." Edward looked between them, clearly searching for some angle, some way to salvage his attack. But he had nothing. His carefully constructed challenge had crumbled in the face of simple biological fact. Martin, meanwhile, had not moved. He stood frozen, his eyes still locked on Marie, his expression cycling through disbelief, joy, and something that looked like awe. "Get out," he finally said to Edward, his voice rough. "Take your false accusations and your manufactured evidence and leave my home. If you ever approach my wife again, if you ever threaten her or attempt to damage her reputation, I will use every resource at my disposal to destroy you. Am I clear?" Edward gathered his papers with shaking hands. "This is not over." "It is," Martin said. "You have no case, no evidence, and no leverage. The marriage is valid. My wife is carrying my heir. You have lost, Edward. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left." Edward fled, his solicitors scrambling after him. leaving Marie and Martin alone in the sudden silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Martin crossed to her, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "A child?" he whispered. "We are truly having a child." Marie nodded, tears beginning to fall. "I am sorry I told you this way. I wanted it to be private, special." Martin kissed her, soft and reverent. "This is special. You standing before our enemy and claiming our future. You refusing to be ashamed or diminished. Marie, you are extraordinary." He dropped to his knees before her, his hands moving to rest on her stomach. "May I?" "Yes," Marie said, emotion making her voice thick. Martin pressed his forehead against her, his hands gentle on her abdomen. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this gift, for our child, for everything you have given me." Marie's hands moved into his hair, holding him close. "We did this together, Martin. This child is a testament to what we built, to choosing each other despite our fears." Martin looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "I love you. God, Marie, I love you so much. I thought I could never feel this again, and now I am overwhelmed with it. Love for you. Joy for our child. Hope for our future." Marie pulled him to his feet and into her arms. "I love you too, so very much." They stood that way for a long time, holding each other, marveling at the life growing between them and the love they had found against all odds. Later that evening, as they sat before the fire in their shared chambers, Martin's hand resting protectively on Marie's stomach, they talked about the future. "We should write to Rose," Marie said. "She will be thrilled. And my mother's family," Martin added. "They will want to celebrate." Marie leaned against him, content and hopeful. "Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" "I do not care," Martin said honestly, "as long as our child is healthy and knows they are loved." "They will know," Marie promised. "They will grow up seeing parents who chose each other, who built something real from necessity and transformed it into love." Martin kissed the top of her head. "You saved me, Marie. I was drowning in grief, and you pulled me back to life." "We saved each other," Marie corrected. "You gave me security and respect when the world offered me nothing. You saw my worth when others saw only my poverty." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire, feeling the weight and wonder of the future growing within Marie. The widow without prospects had become a duchess carrying an heir. The duke who swore never to love again had opened his heart completely. Together, they had faced down enemies, overcome fears, and built something neither had dared hope for. A marriage that began with the harsh words, "You are mine until I have my heirs," had transformed into something far more beautiful, a partnership of equals, a love that had grown from honesty and vulnerability, and the courage to be seen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Parenthood would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. But Marie and Martin would face it all together, united by choice and love, and the unshakable certainty that they had found their home in each other. Outside, winter was finally releasing its grip. Spring was coming, bringing with it the promise of new life, new beginnings, and a future brighter than either had dared to dream. 2 years later, Ashford House had transformed. Where once there had been silence, now there was laughter. Marie walked through the rose garden, holding the hand of her daughter Emily, whose dark curls bounced with each step. Behind them, Martin carried their son Jonathan, the boy's giggles echoing across the lawn. Emily ran to her father. "Papa, up!" Martin crouched, balancing both children, and Marie's heart swelled. This man who had sworn never to love again now overflowed with it. "Do you remember when we first met?" Martin asked later, as they walked the estate at sunset. "When we were both so afraid?" Marie smiled, leaning into him. "And now look at us." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You gave me my life back." "We gave each other everything," Marie corrected. 2 lonely souls had found each other in darkness, and together they had created light. Marie's journey reminds us that we are never too broken to begin again. That true love grows not from perfection, but from the courage to be vulnerable with another human being. She refused to accept being invisible or diminished, and in demanding respect, she not only saved herself, but also the man she came to love. Sometimes our greatest transformations come from the quiet decision to stop accepting less than we deserve. Marie stood in her worth even when the world questioned it, and she found that when we refused to settle, we opened the door to something extraordinary. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to help this channel share more stories of hope and courage. Subscribe so you never miss another tale of love and resilience, and comment below with where you are listening from. Thank you for being here, and may you always find the courage to demand the love you deserve.